Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Borderlands OpenBLCMM modding tutorial. My name is Aaron, and today we are going to be changing the Herald into its own custom gun by changing its name, its parameters, including the way that the gun shoots and acquires its stats, all the way down to even a custom barrel for the gun. If you did not watch the day 0, 1, or 2 videos, you can go ahead and rewatch those to get an idea of where to begin and how to start modding. So just as an aside, I did change my OBS settings as I watched the day 2 video back, and I saw a lot of stuttering and cutting out as I was playing the game. Apparently my settings did not save previously, or OBS did not save those settings properly the last time, so they have been changed now. I do apologize for that. From now on, you should see a lot smoother gameplay as we go further and further into the modding sections. So I just wanted to clear that up real quick. As you can see, I already have my OpenBLCMM open, and remember back on day 1, we did do a targeted hotfix to change the overall damage of the Herald from 0.2 to negative 0.2 because we were only changing the one value in that arrayed list for the weapon attribute effects. Today, we're going to be completely changing the gun works and making an entirely new array of weapon attribute effects. We're going to do this basically starting from the very top. In this video, I am going to categorize how I personally would do my own custom gun. So now, we're going to go back to our folder that says Herald and click on the drop-down arrow, which it already is here. We have our one line of code that we did for the weapon attribute effects, and that's it. So, in this folder, we're going to make some new categories. We're going to be changing the name of the Herald, we're going to be changing its stats, and then finally, we're going to be changing the firing pattern of the gun. The first thing we want to do is make 3 new categories under this Herald folder. So we're going to click on the Herald folder line. This will turn dark red. And then again, we can press Ctrl+H, or you can right-click and select the prompt Create New Category. Name the first one Title. Then we're going to create another empty category, and this one is going to be named Stats. Then we're going to make one final one, and this will be called Bullet, simply because this encompasses the entire firing pattern that we're going to be changed. You can name these whatever you like, and honestly, it's up to you on how you organize your custom creations, but this is personally how I would do it, so that it looks more organized for people who actually do want to look at your mod and see that it's all organized and it looks pretty. You can leave all of these out in the open if you wanted to as uncategorized, but again, this is just personally how I would do it. Next, we're going to delete our previous Herald code that we made. So we're just going to go ahead and click on this line, and you can press the delete key on your keyboard, or you can right click and select delete, and this will get rid of that entire line of code. A confirmation window will pop up. Go ahead and click yes. So now we're basically back to scratch on our custom gun. So let us imagine for a second an entirely different way that the Unkempt Herald operates. It's now going to have a bandit barrel instead of a Torg barrel. It's no longer called the Herald and is instead called Rockstar, and it's going to shoot 6 pellets in a star pattern, and it's going to fire semi-auto instead of a traditional full-auto Torg pistol would. Now this might seem like a lot of changes, but if you follow the top down, I promise you it will be much easier to follow a fashion of creation that doesn't overwhelm you. So, we know that the gun itself is called the Unkempt Herald. We know this from the gun's weapon name part definition. So, let's go ahead and open Object Explorer. Then what we'll do is we'll do a get all for weapon name part definition. And once it's done, load it up here. We'll go all the way to the bottom until we can see the lines for pistols. And we are going to look for the one that says Torg title legendary Kala. It is going to be this one here. We're going to go ahead and copy this entire object. And then now, let's go back to our OpenBLCMM interface. We're going to go ahead, click on this title folder, and then insert a new line of code. Remember that every bit of code that we do starts with set. Then we're going to paste this object. Finally, we're going to be changing this particular part's name. If we go back to our object, let's go ahead and click here. We can confirm that this part name is Unkempt Herald. So we're going to go ahead and change this part name. So we're going to type part name, and then we're going to call this Rockstar. So Rockstar. Then click OK. Make sure your checkbox is checked on so you see that this code turns white. We are not going to hotfix this particular line of code because we do not need to. Once the game checks and loads this particular object up, it will stay loaded forever. The only reason we hotfix all of our other code that we did on day 1 or day 2 is because Axton isn't always loaded in. His objects aren't always loaded in as a result. And some objects don't exist in the game until you are actually in the game itself. So now we're going to make another line of code. Going back to this particular object here, I want to draw your attention to the custom presentations field in this particular object. It gives us an attribute presentation definition. Double-clicking on this line takes us to an entirely new object, and in its no constraint text field, it says, did I fire 6 shots or only 5? 3? 7? Whatever. As we all know from Borderlands 2, that's the red text or the flavor text that comes on the Unkempt Herald. And we're going to go ahead and be changing this as well. So what we want to do is also copy this entire object, go back to Object Explorer, and we're going to insert a new line of code. I'm going to type set, paste the new object, and we know that it's a no constraint text, so we're going to say no constraint text. And then we're going to go ahead and just call this hey now. Everyone gets the reference. If you don't, it's Smash Mouth, but you can literally just put this however you like. It doesn't really matter in the end, but this is just for the purposes of changing the red text on the gun. That's what we're going to be changing it to. So now we're actually done with this section of the gun. The name of the object that the Unkempt Herald spawns with, the barrel itself, will have this new name of Rockstar, and the red text will be different. So now we're going to go ahead and save. And just as an aside, OpenBLCMM does save a copy of your mod every 2 minutes. So in the event something catastrophic happens, like you lose progress on your mod, or your computer shuts down, or you need to update it, you can get back to your mod within the last 2 minutes of when it's saved. So, next portion here is going to be the stats. The stats are going to be the actual stats that appear on the weapon. So the weapon damage, the weapon's spread, which is shown on the weapon card as accuracy, its fire rate, its reload time, magazine size, and if the gun has an elemental, it'll have the elemental status damage and then the elemental status chance. The stats of a particular barrel on a gun are kept under the weapon part definition. And as we did in the day 1 video, We do know that the object that we're looking for is the GD underscore weapon underscore pistol dot barrel dot pistol underscore barrel underscore torque underscore kala. But if you don't remember that from heart, what you can do is just do a get all weapon part definition once again. And then this will bring up all of the different weapon parts that are in the game. We're going to go ahead and scroll down all the way to where it says barrel. And we're going to find the torg underscore kala. And we're going to go ahead and click on that one. All right. So now we're going to go ahead and copy the weapon attribute effects for this particular gun. So once again, we're going to go over to OpenBLCMM. We are going to insert a new line of code. We're going to paste the object. We're going to go back to Object Explorer, and we are going to copy all of the weapon attribute effects that this gun has. We're going to select everything from weapon attribute effects equals all the way down to the last parenthesis line. So we're going to copy, Alt-Tab back, and we're going to paste that. And then just as before, we're going to get rid of the equal sign. So right now, as of this reading, the Herald increases its own magazine size by 4, the weapon shot cost by 2, decreases the fire interval by negative 0.05, and scales the weapon damage by 20%. Remember when I said in day 2 that base value attributes override this base value constant? So this one is saying if the weapon is torg, then flag is 1, otherwise 0. However, if you look at the weapon balance definition on this particular gun, you'll find that realistically, the unkempt Herald barrel cannot spawn on any other weapon because it's a legendary. It's tied to one specific balance only. So this line of code that we have here is a little bit redundant. Why Gearbox decided to make it code this way, I have no idea. So we're going to go ahead and change this entire array. We're going to go back to this first attribute, and we're going to go ahead and start with the most basic one, and that's going to be weapon damage. If you're ever unsure on how to grab attributes, remember in the day 2 video that you can select the class browser in Object Explorer. There is a folder called Attribute Value Resolver. Then we go to D_attributes, click the drop-down arrow, and then scroll all the way down to where you can see weapon, click on the drop-down arrow, and then you can see all of the different attributes that are tied with guns specifically. So let's go ahead and change this clip size to damage. As we can see over in our object browser over here, it is just simply going to be weapon damage. So we'll do just that, weapon damage. So I do want to make an aside here. If you did spell this incorrectly, like say for example DAAMGE, notice how this is yellow and it is underlined here. That means it is referencing a particular attribute or class in the game. So if we click on this here with it misspelled, Object Explorer is going to be like, hey, this attribute doesn't exist. So if you're ever unsure on if you can get an actual attribute or not, you can actually just click on this and it will pull up the appropriate attribute for you. All right, so now we are going to change this modifier type to a scale. That's going to be MT_scale. And we're going to make this negative 0.4. The reason that it's going to be negative 0.4 is this gun is going to be shooting 6 projectiles in a star pattern. It's basically going to be a shotgun in a handgun format. For proper balancing, it's very difficult to get something right the first time, which is why a lot of people will say this kind of modding is a very trial and error, which, yes, it is. But for right now, we're going to leave this at negative 0.4. Next, we're going to be changing this weapon shot cost attribute to weapon projectiles per shot. So that will be this particular attribute right here is weapon projectiles per shot. So I'm going to replace that. All right, and then we are going to leave the modifier type as pre-add, and then we are going to change the base value constant to 5. By default, obviously, guns shoot 1 projectile. There are rare exceptions like bandit launchers that shoot 3, but generally most guns only shoot 1 singular pellet. Now we're adding 5, so it will total to a grand of 6. What if I wanted to tell you that I wanted this Rockstar gun to be able to fire as much as you want to? Sort of like a Jacobs revolver, but it would be a semi-auto instead of a regular full auto, like a Torgue gun usually is. We actually can change that. So for this line, we're going to keep it as a weapon fire interval. However, we're going to augment this line a little bit. We're going to go to our base value attribute, and we're going to highlight everything up until the very last comma, and we're going to type none. None is going to populate to blue, and it is now going to look pretty. As an aside, capitalization is very important. So if you see, for example, I did all caps on none, it did not turn blue, so therefore it would not cooperate. Same thing here. Spelling and capitalization is incredibly important when you are doing this kind of modding. And so next, we're going to go to this base value scale constant, and we're going to change this to 1. Again, you can put the leading zeros if you wish, but it is not necessary. And what we are going to change this base value constant to is going to be negative 0.4. What this line is doing is adding negative 0.4 to the fire interval of a weapon. Fire interval is the time between shots on a weapon. It is not the fire rate of a weapon. Fire rate is assigned in the actual weapon type of the gun. We're going to be taking a look at those later. But just know by decreasing a gun's fire interval, you are directly decreasing the time between shots and subsequently increasing the overall fire rate, but you are not affecting the fire rate specifically. We'll get a little bit more into this logic a little bit later, but for right now, fire interval negative is good, fire interval positive is bad. And then finally, the last attribute where it says weapon damage, we are going to change this to automatic burst count. So as you can see here, there is an attribute for an automatic burst count. So we're going to change that. Automatic burst count. Weapon automatic burst count is the number of shots in a gun before it cannot fire anymore. The best example of this is going to be a doll weapon. For assault rifles and SMGs, they're fully automatic when you hip fire them, which means their automatic burst count is set to 0. But when you ADS with them, they change to burst fire, which is adding to this attribute. And most commonly, they'll be set to 3. So a 3-shot burst. Do. So the most common thing is going to be 0 is full auto, 1 is going to be semi-auto, and then after that, everything is going to be a burst fire with the appropriate number of rounds. So 2 is going to be a 2-shot burst, 3 is going to be a 3-shot burst, so on and so forth. We're going to go back to this base value attribute, do the same exact thing, highlight everything to the comma point, and we're going to type none. We're going to go to this base value scale constant, and we are going to change this to 1.0, just like we did before. We are going to go to the base value constant field, and we are also going to change this to a 1. And then finally, we're going to change this modifier type to a pre-add. If we had left this as a scale, what would attempt to do is it would multiply the automatic burst count of the weapon by 1, which, if your burst count is already set to 0, it wouldn't do anything. You can't multiply anything by 0. So it's very important to distinguish when you need to have a pre-add and post-add versus when you need a scale. Then go ahead and click OK. And make sure this checkbox is marked. Going back, I did also say that I wanted the gun to have a bandit barrel instead of a Torg barrel. So how can we do that? Well, let's go back to our previous object that we have, and we'll scroll all the way down until we can see these 2 lines here. There's a boolean called B is Gestalt mode, and that is equal to true. And then we have another one that says Gestalt mode skeletal mesh name equals pistol underscore barrel underscore Torg. The mesh of the gun can actually be changed without having to make an entirely new barrel. So all we would have to do is just make another line of code in OpenBLCMM changing this particular object and that field. So we're going to go back here. We're going to copy this, just that, and then we're going to go to Gestalt mode skeletal mesh name. We're going to copy that, and then we're going to space, and then we're going to type pistol barrel bandit. All of these underscores are very important, so make sure it looks exactly like this. And then click OK. So now, when we load into the game and we look at our new Herald, this will change the look of the gun to be a bandit barrel now instead of a Torg. And then go ahead and save. We're actually done with the weapon attribute effects and stats folder of our gun. So what you can do is you can actually toggle these off so that they don't appear anymore. So we're making some pretty good progress. So the next thing that we want to do now is look at the firing mode of the weapon. So as you may or may not know, if you're familiar with Borderlands 2, the Unkempt Herald splits off into 7 different pellets after a short time, and they travel in a somewhat kind of cone shape. This is what is known to us as a custom firing mode definition. So let's return back to our previous object of the barrel, which we have here, gd underscore wep underscore pistol dot barrel dot pistol underscore barrel underscore Torg underscore kalo. You can see here that there is a custom firing mode definition, and it gives us a new object. So let's check this out by double clicking on it. Firing mode definitions house everything that is needed regarding the special properties of a bullet, projectile, or beam. In this example, the Unkempt Herald's firing type is a bullet. We can distinguish that with this. Bullets are the easiest to work with, while projectiles have special properties that need a behavior provider definition in order to basically function. As we scroll down here, we see there is an on any impact. On any impact events run when the bullet hits any kind of surface, whether it be the world or an enemy or an entity, like an environmental barrel. We see there is a behavior explode, but we are actually going to keep that as it is. Lifetime is how long the bullet lives for. We're going to leave all of these options alone for now. As we scroll down here, we can see that there is something called a timer events. This list, in essence, is what is giving the Herald its particular special firing mode, quote unquote. But we don't want that. We want to change this so that it has its own special firing pattern that's not on a timer event. So what we're going to do is we are going to make, you guessed it, another line of code. So instead, we are going to be going to the bullet folder, and we are going to do a set, and we are going to go ahead and do the timer events here. We don't want the timer events for this particular gun. We want to just have a special firing pattern mode. So therefore, we need to get rid of all of the timer events in this line of code. So to do that, we're going to go ahead and copy our firing mode object. We're going to go back here. We're going to do timer events, and then we're going to put 2 parentheses here. So left, space, and then right. The reason we do this line the way that it is here is because timer events is still an arrayed list. This is basically saying this array has nothing in it, but we still want to format it as an array. So we want to keep its original properties, but just have it run nothing. That's what we're doing now. So now how do we get the star pattern, like how the gun should operate? I'm going to go ahead and make a new line of code here, basically doing the same thing that we did before. Like I said, we got rid of the timer events, and we now have something new that you probably did not see in the actual firing mode object, but it is still there. And that is called firing pattern lines. I'm going to go ahead and type that out now. Firing pattern lines are specific firing lines or patterns that exist on a particular firing mode. For example, you can take a look at any shotgun firing mode, and you will see that it actually has its own firing pattern line. What I have done is I have used an outside resource. There is this resource, it is called the Firing Pattern Editor, and it is made by a talented modder by the name of Juso. And what it allows you to do is it allows you to make your own firing patterns by just simply clicking on an image, and then it will assign the firing pattern as such. So I'm going to go ahead and copy what I made in that particular program all the way over to this line of code. I will paste this as a file in the description of this video here so that you all can follow along with it, because if I had to run this, or if I had to explain this from the very top down, it would take literally hours. And once again, if your code looks whack or out of shape here, you can hit the auto format button and it will automatically realign everything for you. So now we're going to go ahead and click OK. So what this is telling us now is that the firing pattern mode is no longer based on a timer event. It is now based on a firing pattern line, which gives each individual pellet its own associated property, like I said before. You can make some very complex firing patterns, but for the sake of this tutorial, I will just go ahead and keep it simple. So let's save our mod, and then let's load into the game. Alright, so as we can see here, our Herald is now called the Rockstar. It still has its double pellets accessory, so it's actually getting 10 projectiles instead of the 6 that we assigned it. The double pellet accessory is weird like that. You'll see this on the Maggie. It'll have 10 pellets instead of 6. And when we go ahead and fire it here, it kind of has that pseudo star pattern. It's a little bit weird, but it functionally, it's still the same as a star. And all the other parts look good on it. So we still have the torque grip, and we still have the torque sight on it. So if you like this video, then be sure to go ahead and give it a like, subscribe to see more of these videos, and ring the bell to be notified when I post a new video for this series. So until the next time, I'll catch you all next time. Take care.